ribs tonight and I didn't burn the house down.
Yay!
I'm really proud of myself.
There's no fire involved. That's a plus.
The new fire extinguishers stayed in their little nooks.
Oh.
Didn't have to pull them out.
I like that you have multiple now.
We had multiple
before. I know
really?
myself.
Listen,
I need all the backup I can get.
Also, we had a restaurant.
Nice.
Fair enough. Hello, and welcome to another day of higher education.
Did you say another gay?
Another day of
He
higher
did
education.
say another
Well,
day. I heard.
Okay.
Well, we'll get into that too.
Welcome to You're No Fun Anymore, the podcast where we deal with our nostalgia. I'm Randall.
I'm Dana.
I'm Bryce.
I'm Alexandra.
And I'm Helen.
And today we are going to be looking back at Pretty in Pink, or the fantabulous failed emancipation of one Andie Walsh.
I love this woman. I love this woman, and I have to tell her. And if she laughs, she laughs.
Who is this guy?
Name's Blaine. So beautiful.
Blaine? Oh, that's a major appliance. That's not a name.
When it feels like this.
Listen, my best friend is conversing with a mutant. You just happen to like her, right?
You know, maybe this shouldn't happen.
You know, maybe it doesn't happen all the time, but doesn't mean it isn't right?
Take a chance.
Does he have strong lips?
He's gonna use you and then throw you away.
You're ashamed to be seen with me. You're ashamed to go out with me.
Pretty in Pink, rated PG-13.
Content warning. This selected film may contain scenes depicting the following: sexual assault, rampant misogyny, homophobic and ableist slurs, negging, stalking, class violence, bizarre parent-child power dynamics, underage drinking, and woke Andrew Dice Clay. And now, back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
You know, I've been out with a lot of girls at this school. I don't see what makes you so different.
I have some taste.
Just don't write love songs like they used to.
So to set the scene here, this film was released in February 28th, 1986. This makes second movie we did from 1986?
Good year.
It was a good year for movies, honestly. By the time the end of February rolled around, Calvin and Hobbes had only been in print for a few months. The Nintendo Entertainment System entered its second American test market in Los Angeles after selling mildly successfully at 90,000 units in New York City the previous holiday season. Total sales, by the way, for the Nintendo Entertainment System would be 61.9 million units. Reagan was well into his second term. Wealth inequality was skyrocketing for the first time since before World War II and following the Great Compression. That's What Friends Are For was on the radio. Number one hit. The AIDS benefit song stayed on the charts for a month after being released the previous holiday season. This is also the first year that Martin Luther King Jr. Day was recognized as a federal holiday. This is also the last year that vinyl sales would gross higher than CDs, already losing that number one spot to cassettes earlier in the decade.
Now vinyl sales have outpaced CDs again.
Well, gross profit, yes, but it is a bizarre world that we live in. That here we are, the last year that vinyl was popular, and we have featured a movie which heavily relied on a vinyl soundtrack.
Great soundtrack.
Oh,
Fantastic soundtrack.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
So getting on to the movie Pretty in Pink.
Yay.
That's going to be the last compliment you hear come out of my mouth. It's
Yeah,
a great soundtrack.
Other compliment, any thoughts?
Can we do a pre-watch star rating and then a post-watch star rating?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
great
I think we
idea.
should- yeah.
And also, when was the last time we watched this? Because I remember watching this, I think, when I was a senior in high school, maybe.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, because that was the last time I watched it.
Which would make that 22 years. Am I right with math?
I'm going to take your
22
word for
years
it.
ago.
I was 14.
And I remember loving it. I probably would have gotten a 4 stars for me at the age of 18.
Yeah, same.
4.5 stars for me, and I think the last time I saw it was 2 years ago, maybe.
Oof.
I watch it a lot.
Besides this watch last night, I think I've only seen it in its entirety once through, and it didn't really stick with me. Basically, when I was trying to recall the plot, it was less of vivid pictures and more of like a cave painting of
shadows and light.
Yeah, it wasn't anything particularly clear. And most of it I probably took by osmosis from like BuzzFeed quizzes and stuff. So I'm going to say it was like dead in the middle for me, a 3-star rating as a pre-watch. Post-watch, 1 fucking star. This movie.
Post-watch, maybe 2 stars.
Guys are being rough.
Yeah.
I got real angry.
I know I haven't seen this in over a decade, and my memories definitely got spongy.
Yeah.
Who knew that I would actually agree with the love advice from Andrew Dice Clay?
Right?
Those are words that I would have never pictured coming out of my
short
mouth, but here we are.
important. Yeah, a short but significant cameo.
Yeah, very, very poignant. Well, let's kind of dive into that. First of all, would you say that this was a success or not?
Yes, it was.
It was a major success. It actually had a 43-week run.
Holy cannoli.
Wow.
And it made a little over $40 million, especially off a $9 million budget. That's a pretty big win. It put it in the top 25 highest grossing films of 1986, which is a huge year. You're talking Aliens, Top Gun, tons of sequels that were coming out. But this one fell right along the lines of like Peggy Sue Got Married, Jewel of the Nile, Stand By Me, all around that $40 million range. This also was John Hughes' first executive producer project. He wrote this specifically for Molly Ringwald. Also, Howard Deutsch, this is his first feature film, so you got a lot of first-timers here, and it was a good thing that they managed to bring in Lauren Schuler to smooth out those factors. Paramount thought you needed somebody to guide the helm, and at that point, Lauren Schuler, who was a young and incredibly talented producer, had already done Mr. Mom, Lady Hawk, St. Elmo's Fire. She continues to be an absolute rock star producer with the X-Men films. She produced Deadpool, Logan. She and Richard Donner were a pretty, formidable team. That's her husband. And yeah, really owned the 80s and 90s. And she continues to be an incredible producer today. So plot-wise, this thing is pretty boilerplate.
Totally. So thin.
It is. Thin. It's almost at parts where you're watching vignettes and kind of having to fill in the blanks, especially when you see Andie's friends in high school.
Yeah.
And I get why it plays. And
well, we were trying to apply like more complication to it. Alex, she was like, "Is this going to be like She's All That, where they made a bet and it all turned?"
Because like there was
it's not even that.
It's like there were parts of it where I can barely remember what this plot is, but I just feel like
there's got to be something more to it.
There's something more to it, like because he's rich and he's all of a sudden fawning over her, and yeah, she's cute, but I mean those outfits.
Also, what was the timeline of this movie? Did this movie take place in 3 days? Because that's
3 days. I know. They're like madly in love. Does anybody remember a full-length conversation that the two of them had on screen? The most awkward, from what I can gather of their entire romantic relationship, is the most awkward face-chewing kissing.
Yeah, terrible kissing. Gross.
Such bad kissing. Like even the little pecking in the barn. I was like, that's just annoying. That would drive me crazy if somebody was pecking at my face like a little bird.
They saw the chickens in the barn and they were like, reproducing that.
I did not understand. I didn't understand anything. Honestly, I was mad from 5 minutes in until the very end. I was mad.
There was a lot of points where we shouted, all these guys are jerks.
I know. I literally wrote I put things in order of all the possible romantic incarnations in order from possible best to very, very worst.
Oh, I'm excited about this because I cannot. Everybody's an asshole.
Can I step in for a second, just to give the alternate perspective, since I appear to be the only one that genuinely loved this movie? I would not call any of you guys classic romantics. I am a classic romantic, I think, and always have been, particularly when it comes to movies. And I think for a teenager watching this movie, because I think the first time I saw it was when I was 15 or 16.
Yeah.
Andie and Blaine give you everything you need as far as a romance goes, because you don't want any of the conversations.
So it's just like you see somebody.
Let me have my opinion, Starless.
You can have your opinion.
Blaine and Andie fall in love with no trouble. It's easy. They have one little fight and they're there, and he just loves her completely. And then he gets a little bit cowardly, but he comes around. And as a teenager, that's all you need, because it's Andrew McCarthy and he's lovely. he's a pretty man. And that's
He's very pretty.
He's
not that pretty.
James Spader is hot.
James Spader's super hot.
I mentioned that James Spader's hair is the most perfect thing in the movie other than Annie Potts.
James Spader's hair, James Spader's nostrils, James Spader's entire thing
his voice
is just wonderful.
Yeah.
I would have him call me trash.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, I forgot how much of a jerk he is in this.
He's
such
a
an asshole.
massive asshole, but at the same time, you're like, God damn, James Spader,
I know.
you can get
I
it.
wrote Spader equals yum. His shitty character equals yuck. I am yucking my own yum.
This is gonna be the scene. It's gonna be the three of you guys going for all of the like kind of effeminate David Bowie types and me standing up for the nerdy guys.
No, I will say that Andrew McCarthy, even though he cut in front of me in line at the Apple store one time, he is my favorite of the guys in the movies. Because I remember I was watching it and I was just like, he is the nicer one. Like, he is the more decent of the ones. Even though he does the stupid thing, he is the better one. I can't believe that I actually felt bad for Duckie when I was young.
For Duckie.
And
I remember
like,
feeling really bad for Duckie.
He's such an incel.
Yep.
He's an
No, he's
incel.
the worst. I was complaining that for the first 20 minutes of the movie, there is no indication that they are actually friends.
Yeah.
Rather than that he is her
Stalker.
obsessive stalker.
Yeah.
No indication the first
Well,
20 minutes.
that's again, I think that's the fault of the text.
No.
Well, yes. When they're studying in her room, and you get that kind of like background of them being friends.
Right, that
from
would have been
childhood.
useful at the
If
beginning.
that had been the first scene, you would have completely sympathized with this character from the get-go. You know, you'd have been like, oh, they've been friends since they were
That was
kids.
the scene where he was singing, right? Where you were like, there's a scene where he's like singing or performing,
No,
and you were like,
No, that was later.
That's in the tracks, yeah.
Not
but-
when he goes into the record
not when he
store.
goes into the record store. There's another scene
He's
where
doing
he's
like a little in the
Oh yeah,
mirror.
yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
it.
Well, I just like to put out there. So I've done a lot of reading about this movie over the years and have a lot of useless knowledge about it, just kind of at the ready. Molly Ringwald found John Cryer to be completely unattractive and had no chemistry with him whatsoever off screen, as opposed to Andrew McCarthy, who she had a major crush on and actually lusted after for the entire movie. So there was very little chance that there was going to be chemistry between Andie and Duckie. However, I find it interesting to consider she pushed really hard for Robert Downey Jr. to play the part of Duckie. And I think that Downey Jr. stepped into that role, Duckie would have had a much better chance and a much better interior life.
Yes.
Sure. But I don't think they would have had the growth out of that because while
growth.
Yeah, no
Duckie actually has Duckie has in more than anything, and this is gonna be my hill to die on. More than anything, yes, he's taking all the wrong things out of this and he's behaving exactly like a teenage boy at that age does. Irrationally and vindictively. And out of that, in those moments of solace when he is sitting there and he's lashing out, at the very end, what he ends up doing is saying, like, my friendship with you is actually the more important part. And that's why that scene works. The alternate ending that they added to the film, that is the ending that is there now, I think works in his favor. It's still not an excuse, but it shows a growth. They're saying, I'm going to step back and forget what the fuck I want. You want this guy, go get the guy.
But it's not earned because there's no moment where you see him make that change.
No, he's just looking gloomy in his what, a squat? Does he live in a squat? And he's just sitting like on his mattress on the floor being moody, and suddenly he has some kind of like major emotional breakthrough.
Right.
Well, and he's like, our friendship means more to me. I'm like, what friendship? You sexually harassing your friend for the entirety of this 90-minute movie in a way that like
wanted strangers.
Yeah, like I wanted to reach the screen and punch him. He was
You know the one person he did have chemistry with? Annie Potts.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Annie Potts is perfection. Annie Potts is absolute perfection.
I was so okay. We're jumping ahead. I was so mad when Annie Potts changed her character to that dude. Like that was worse than Sandy's transformation at the end of Grease. Just awful.
I believe my note says Annie Potts is absolutely perfect, except for that last scene. What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't change.
Odd connection to Grease. The shooting location for this whole movie is supposed to be set in Chicago, but it's just shot all over LA and Santa Monica. So the high school is John Marshall High School, which is where they shot parts of the exterior from Grease.
Oh.
So they have that in common.
Oh, and also a shitty transformation of a pretty awesome female lead. Oh, terrible.
I again, with this whole like unearned character development, Blaine really doesn't change or learn anything. He just learns not to be a weenie.
But he doesn't learn that.
Andie, like, what does Andie do? She doesn't change anything.
Also, how does he have the revelation about Steph, about James Spader? I mean, the only reason he realizes that is because he looks at him in the middle of prom and decides that he was rejected?
That's actually a suffered from the... Okay, so we should just get into this now. So the original ending of this, I actually found an article from about a decade ago from the Miami Herald where somebody pulled up the original Hughes script. This doesn't exist in any form other than answer prints, and nobody has like an actual copy, but you've heard everybody in interviews talk about it. There's some behind the scenes footage. So the way that this rolls out is Andie shows up solo to the prom, just the way that the movie does. And then there is Duckie. And they both have that moment of, oh my God, we're actually just awesome friends. And again, whether that's earned or not, that's up to the audience. So they walk in hand together to basically say, fuck you snobs. You know, we're in it together. It's us against the world. Blaine sees this and does the same thing where he walks over, and rather than being confrontational with all of his rich friends, he shakes Duckie's hand like they do in the movie, and they have a little like no harm, no foul kind of moment. At that point, Andie takes Duckie's hand, walks him onto the dance floor. The crowd separates, opens into a large circle, cuts back to Blaine, and James Spader's, of course, super pissed at him, gives him the whole, like, she's trash, what are you doing? And rather than this little speech that he gives, he just knees him in the balls.
That would have been much better.
And he doesn't make any sense, but sure, funnier.
Sure, yeah, because, I mean, I guess in that sense, it shows that he's actually standing up to something and not just like, you know, doing, I don't know. It's a little bit wonky. So they get to everybody clears out because they're like, ew, the poor freaks are here. The band leader starts up, and of course the song is Heroes by David Bowie. Duckie is terrified. He says, I can't dance. Andie says, either can I. Duckie says, are we crazy? Andie says, completely. Andie takes a few steps, starts dancing. Duckie follows clumsily. A few steps, they get into it. They dance without shame or concern what anybody else thinks as the audience watch. Blaine turns his back, watching this with a smile, and they leave. Steph and Benny are glaring. Steph can't hide his anger at feeling being undone by Duckie. Kate glowers at Blaine for his gesture to Duckie. Honestly, Blaine couldn't care less. Andie and Duckie look at each other with a smile. Duckie laughs. Andie squeezes him tight and lifts him off his feet. Freeze frame, fade to pink, music titles.
And everyone hated it.
Yeah, there was audible booing, apparently, from the test screenings.
As no one in their right mind wants Duckie and Andie to end up together.
18-year-old me did.
Not even as like, well, see, the way that Cryer has said and the way that Hughes had written it was that it was the friendship that withstood this all, because he was a very class-conscious guy for being essentially a suburban professional class person. He had a very biting satire. I mean, there's a reason why he wrote for National Lampoon for so long. And I think that he had a lot of ideas banging around in the script that just didn't iron out. And when the audience reacted to that, they were reacting to it the way that people wanted. Like, they want the girl to get the guy. Like, what the fuck? So they had to do a quick reshoot where they changed the ending where she gets Andrew McCarthy. Oddly enough, you know who the alternate was for Andrew McCarthy's character for Blaine? Charlie Sheen.
Ew.
Oh. Yeah.
Although he was very handsome when he was younger, but still.
He still would have been sleazy in that.
Yeah.
Like, Andrew McCarthy definitely has a very sincere and sweet quality about him. And I think that's what sells him as a charismatic romantic lead in a film like this. And I think he ends up proving that he also has amazing comedic chops when he later goes on and does Mannequin.
And Weekend at Bernie's.
And Weekend at Bernie's, yeah.
You know what? Muppet Babies did a thing where Miss Piggy had a fantasy sequence where Blaine, from the scene where he asked Sandy out on a date, It's Blaine and Miss Piggy, and Miss Piggy is Andie, and they just have a little back and forth, and I fell in love with him. I wanted to be Miss Piggy.
His facial features are too small for his face. I said what I said, Dana.
Yep. I just didn't understand the whole courtship. It just the whole like hacking her computer. Like,
hacking, a little,
quote unquote hacking.
I completely forgot that was in that movie, and it feels like this was also in. There's a scene in like Revenge of the Nerds where this happens, where and I think it was just like computers, they're a thing.
Yeah,
kids like them, right?
You know how we got that picture of her so fast?
Yeah, so fast and so high res.
So high res.
Wow. Also, the hacking moment indicates that he may have like skills and a hobby and interests and like things that he's good at that they never receive.
What are they? Yeah, exactly. I have no sense of personality from anybody except Andie and Duckie. That's it.
Character development for those three characters, we would have lost Annie Potts because she's the only removable character.
Yeah.
So we have to take our Annie Potts where we can get her.
Yeah. They ended up bringing her on because she was such an outstanding supporting character in Ghostbusters. And she even has that little bit of Janine in there when she answers the phone. She goes, "What do you want?"
I love her so much. Legacy from the 80s is not having any customer service skills over the phone.
Oh yeah, but so in original readings, they were pulling Tracy Ullman to do that.
Oh, she would have been good too.
She would have been good.
She would have been real good.
The offers were also for Angelica Houston, but she had declined.
She would have been terrifying.
Yeah.
I could see that like little Morticia Addams kind of.
Like Goth Den Mother? Yeah.
Goth Den Mother, yeah. I'm picturing her from like The Grifters, where she is just absolutely terrifying.
Witches.
That's what I was thinking of.
In a very different interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, Annie Potts totally.
But also Annie Potts, she's in it and she's talking about, like that prom dress she has from like the 60s. And then she's talking about, how Andie is half her age. I was like, how old are you supposed to be, Annie Potts? Because you look like maybe 20.
I'm like, oh, I remember Annie Potts being so old. And then I watched it. I'm like, oh, she's like the cool 22-year-old friend.
She just graduated high school. She's in like her last year of college or something.
She's in super debt for owning this record store, but she always wanted it. And then I'm like, you're supposed to be how old?
Well, until she puts on the mom clothes at the end of the movie, and then she looks her age.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this film needed that because, the incredible performance of Harry Dean Stanton in a very awkward parent-child relationship. But you needed the Annie Potts in there to kind of balance out. He's such he's so good at being broken in that.
Hated him.
You don't even need to know why he's broken. He's just... See,
and I'm like, did he just wake up one day and decide that he didn't feel like being an alcoholic anymore? Like, what was his arc? None of his arc made any sense.
I understand his arc, and I understand his purpose. He is what Duckie would be if Duckie got Andie, because Andie would end up leaving. It's the same. He has the speech in the middle of the movie where he tells Duckie, don't pursue this because it's just going to break you like it broke me. And then I think the idea is he tries to improve himself for his daughter, but I always saw it as this is a loop. I feel like he's in a whole different, very serious.
Right. I was bothered that he was apparently supposed to be endearing and loving. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. I never got that. I always felt he was like the creepy dad that walks around with no clothes on all the time.
Oh, see, the first scene, I'm like, is alcoholic Henry Dean Stanton supposed to be like adorable and endearing, but yet a little bit broken? And then he was nebulous and weird. Like, they took two characters, like a good parent and that abusive, neglectful alcoholic parent, and they're like, we could just
put them together in one teen movie. we need to be really real about this one specific aspect.
Well, you only got 96 minutes, so kids aren't going to hang around that long. And I think that, pacing wise, I was surprised at how. Again, I think it's probably not a feature, but its pacing does really keep you going along, and I think that's because of the soundtrack.
You can't see this, but I'm shaking my head emphatically no.
I know.
This movie seems so long to me, and then I'm like, but it's only 96 minutes. Why is this movie so long?
Oh, no.
I think the rage carried me along because it didn't seem very long to me. It was fine.
I think I wrote oof Duckie at least 6 times in the notes.
Yep.
There's one bit that I absolutely love, which is the so-called date. The
worst date ever? The worst
Right.
date ever.
This is where I think the intended meat of this whole movie was supposed to be about if you're from, a working class background, you're poor and you're going with these rich people, they're not going to accept you, and love breaks through all these barriers, blah, 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 blah.
I like how she put her best mother of the bride dress on in order to go on that date.
Well, let me talk about her clothes for just a second, and then we'll get back to the date. Every single outfit is one of the Golden Girls.
Yes.
Her prom dress, like the neckline was
The prom dress is the worst.
And then the boxiness of the dress made me.
All she had to do was make it form-fitting. That was
That's it.
Yeah, that lace neckline in the back is so like perfect.
So
it's beautiful.
Rectangle.
So there's a story behind that.
Did Molly Ringwald actually have to sew the dress herself?
So Marilyn Vance, who was the costume designer for the film, did an interview in 2013 where apparently, like, she was quoted saying, Ringwald hated it. She hated
Understandable.
dress. She absolutely hated it with a passion. They were like basically getting into a fight with John Hughes about it during production. And her whole concept was, what would a high schooler do with 2 cut-up prom dresses? So she just cut up 2 prom dresses like she does in the film. And they're in the trailer with Molly still in high school at this point, because I think she was like 17 or 18 when she was shooting this. She's hating it. Like, they're going back and forth between John Hughes and her, and Andie's not going to wear that. And she's like, well, she's also not going to roll in dressed like Madonna. So they actually got into a very big spat about this. And finally, John Hughes just said, fine, that's it. Molly's going to wear it.
In what universe would a high school girl make a dress that makes her look fat?
Right. Well, also, my heart hurt when Annie Potts spent so much time talking about how she loved her dress and loved
Yes. Yes.
And how inconsiderate teenager Molly Ringwald.
I just need the dress. I just need the dress so I can tear it apart and destroy it.
Like, you love this and you can still fit in it and it means so much to you, and I'm going to shit on it. Amazing.
Oh my God.
Molly Ringwald was bigger than Annie Potts because she was like the size of a pinky. Yeah. But wouldn't it have been cooler, especially with Molly Ringwald's whole style, to just wear the dress?
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
Just like, or even if you are going to alter it, just like take
Have
out
that
some
amazing
of the
neckline.
Honestly, when she's going through that little store and, she's looking at like the $600 prom dresses and all the rich people are doing that, like, these are the kind of things that I was picturing. Okay, so this is the way that she's going to go when she designs this. And then, when that comes out, I'm like, I mean, she pulls it off, kind of.
No, she doesn't.
It's a potato sack.
It's a total potato sack.
She ruined 2 beautiful dresses to make something that holds potatoes.
Yeah. Her boobs look like potatoes. Like, everything about it is just bad.
Those puffy sleeves hold more potatoes.
It looked like Laura Ashley threw up all over that prom. So I understand that they were trying to set her apart with this funky thing. All they had to do was make it a column dress that was that sucker to her waist, and it would have been fine.
Especially like in that opening scene, that first outfit she's wearing is very form fitting. She's like putting on her stockings, and it's a gratuitous 80s movie opening with like,
give her some sort of like shape there instead of just a rectangle.
Oh, it was the worst.
Painful. Obviously, we can talk about the dress for hours.
Yeah,
absolutely. The dress actually makes my list of acceptable romantic leads.
I love that that's better than your alternate.
So my list of acceptable romantic leads in order is...
Give it to us.
First of all, it's the soundtrack.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Second of all, but I wrote this really small because I was embarrassed about it, was Steph. Then was Iona. Then was Iona's boyfriend. Then was the pink dress. And then at the very end was Blaine and Duckie tied for the worst ever.
Okay, yeah, I think you got it right.
Oh, Steph is bottom. Steph was a jerk.
Okay, Steph, he wants somebody to dominate him. He wants to be somebody's sub. Molly Ringwald would have just had to like smack him across the face once and he would have been hers forever.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, Bryce.
He wants a riding crop and like a bitch to be in charge.
So he wants him and Iona should have ended up together.
Perfect.
Yes. Duckie and Iona.
Well, she has that little moment. Like, I mean, they have that little bit where she's like, my thighs have been like,
I know. This is what it's all they had to do to solve this movie was get Duckie and Iona together.
Well, if she'd have been only 22 and he was 18, that would have been fine.
he would have been 18. They're talking it's their senior year.
No, I'm saying like if she's had been
supposed to be like 30
cool friend and not like the ancient AARP member that she apparently I was supposed to be.
She's supposed to be 30. She's cougering it up a little with Duckie. He's of age. What's the problem?
I'm saying there's not a problem, but if she'd have been the 22-year-old we all kind of assumed she was, it would have even been less of a problem. It would have been fine.
Speaking of like the age discrepancies in this, I'm really confused with what the drinking laws are in Chicago at this point in time. I was like,
you're a girl and you have money. Those are the drinking age. Also, how did this movie have no people of color in it whatsoever?
There was one couple dancing at the, and I was like, oh look, it's black people.
Yeah, that's a John Hughes staple. So
the worst thing. Also, I love that there was the F word slur, there was the R word slur, and also the kindly mention of dwarves. It was
all very of its time.
I know, but so jarring to hear now. So jarring. I know. So like it's like watching a crowd scene. You're just like, how dare you?
Well, that kind of, I guess, leads into one of the speculative theories that has been floated around about Duckie in particular. I guess in the later years of the fandom of this film has developed a kind of following as a queer icon.
Yes, I thought that.
But
she was like, wait, he's gay, isn't he?
Yep. When he was hitting on those girls, I was like, why is he fooling himself?
So I went to a screening of The Breakfast Club like 10 years ago that Molly Ringwald and the whole cast was there.
Yeah.
Molly Ringwald was asked about that, and she flat out said Duckie was gay. Period.
Okay.
But Cryer has said that doesn't read, and
it's not necessarily true, but she was convinced.
Well, he definitely had a Liberace vibe, like world's most eligible bachelor kind of thing.
Maybe all of the really insulting comments to women and the not looking for consent and the talking was all just overcompensation.
Well, yeah, I like how we're supposed to feel bad for the dude who sexually assaulted a woman in the middle of the movie.
I don't feel bad for him.
No.
Nope.
Yeah, so Kevin Smolker's he's a essayist who actually wrote a whole thing about like the Brat Pack and like the influence of especially this kind of oeuvre of high school that came out of the heavy consumer 80s. And one of the things that he mentioned, and this is actually brought up in subsequent interviews with both John Cryer and Molly Ringwald, where it's like playing him as gay was just not part of that just wasn't there, because knowing Hughes, he doesn't write for people of color and he doesn't know gay people outside of a stereotype. That's just who he is. This kind of like reinterpretation is, the way he put it is actually kind of interesting. It was like, I could see where it's easier to lift that because it allows a certain queering of a movie where that presence isn't there. It is a weird kind of contention that also just kind of negates the genuine awfulness that he enacts on his supposed friend at that point, which I still think he is. And he genuinely, the thing that would have sold me on that, if that interpretation was going to be, if he actually apologized at some point in time, but he never does. And so I think it's one of those willful things that maybe like we subscribe to much later on.
And I want to bring this up because I find it kind of fascinating, the change in my opinion that's gone on. So I obviously way back in the day when I first saw it, I could have cared less about Duckie. But then when John Hughes died, which was 11 years ago now, I wrote a piece about him for a movie site that I was working on. And one of the points that I made was that one of the lessons John Hughes teaches is that the right guy doesn't always get the girl. And I specifically pointed out Duckie as that guy that, we know he was the one that really loved her and really should have been with her. And at the time, I truly meant it. I go back and I watch it now, and with the conversation and the way that it's shifted and given us kind of a better insight into, these guys don't necessarily deserve the girl just because they love her, because she has no chemistry with him.
Right.
It shifted it again. And now I'm like, yeah, Duckie, I mean, he may not be gay, but he also is not the idealized, misunderstood guy that I think we've made him be over the years.
Right, and that was kind of the point of, I think, when he was writing this, that the wrong lessons were taken away from the character, which honestly, he steals the show in this film. If it wasn't for the performances of John Cryer and specifically Molly Ringwald, and a lot of amazing backup from, you know, all the character actors that were involved in this, this wouldn't be a movie. And even like contemporaneous reviews at that time, Roger Ebert said the same thing. This is elevated just because of the way that these performances seem to be tailored to these characters. And I think that's a big part of it too. When Hughes wrote it, he had Anthony Michael Hall in mind and was actually like personally offended when Hall was like, nah, I don't want to be your nerd for 4 or 5 movies now. So they, you know, went on the hunt. When they came across John Cryer, I don't know if he had much.
It's all Broadway at that point.
Yeah, talk about a breakout. Like, and sure, like the character himself it's hard to excuse a lot of the stuff now, and I think that's why, you know, it is an encapsulation of that time more than anything.
He's a walking eccentricity, you know, like that's his whole spiel, is being the weirdo, charismatic dude, right?
And I think he was supposed to be portrayed as like this free spirit, this weirdo, but it all seemed to be so performative.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, so much of it is in high school, you know, like, so, I mean, I think that's why I felt so bad for Duckie, because he was my heart, you know, he was my weirdo heart. And I just totally like, I understood him from the weirdo perspective, you know, just being that loud, weird, out there character in the room.
So his dance thing, Try a Little Tenderness. Yeah. I'm like, this would be so amazing if he was doing this for himself.
Yeah.
And not to try to impress Andie. Like, if this was legitimately something he was doing because he loved the song, he loved dancing, he loved being a performer, he had any sort of pride in himself and his ability, but it wasn't. It was like, everything comes back to, how do I get the attention of the girl? It's like a pickup artist who wears a fucking doofy hat.
Says Milady a lot.
Like, learns the way of the sword. So instead of being like this free spirit, amazing moment, the Try Little Tenderness dance was like his way of the sword. It was so painful to me.
So in The Trouble with Duckie, with the article that Kevin Smolker wrote, he does credit that Ringwald and Cryer came to agreement about, the more important part about this is the friendship that these two have had, which is the only bonding thing that they as actors really kind of had out of that. Because as you said before, like, Ringwald not attracted to John Cryer in any way, shape, or form. And she even says that, and it comes off as very strange in the interviews. In this, like, it's a backhanded way where she just, like, keeps saying, like, all these other actors. And he's like, yeah, I was just really, really attracted to all these other guys. Cryer's fine.
Well, and that's something I found kind of interesting in, you know, all of my reading that I do in my spare time about this movie. Molly Ringwald and Andrew McCarthy were both apparently horrible to John Cryer on set throughout the entirety of the movie. They were mean. They kept telling him things to his face along the lines of what we're talking about here, that she wasn't attracted to him, that she didn't think that anything he was doing was all that great. There was one scene where Howie Deutsch apparently told Andrew McCarthy and Molly Ringwald to be actively not engaging with John Cryer so that it would make him angrier during the scene. And then after the fact, they told him that was going on, but he was apparently so angry about that moment because it screwed up his performance that he refused to forgive them for the rest of the shoot. So I think you can definitely feel that animosity all the way through. And it does, like, there's always something about it that it feels uncomfortable, even with the friendship between Andie and Duckie. There's never a moment of comfort there.
Yeah, and that actually is interesting because a lot of this is the purity of the rage and the animosity that somebody like Duckie has against just the existence of Steph and Blaine and all these other assholes that routinely probably beat him up on a regular basis, constantly. Like, that is palpable. And I think that's what resonates more than the actual, like, again, the plot part of this. And I think the reason why people still kind of attach themselves to, you know, the performances, there is a genuine heart to watching somebody go through that, especially if it is something that is that visceral where you can see the hatred.
So I think the other interesting part of it is, and we started to talk about this, and I think I changed the subject, so I apologize. There's animosity on both sides of the income inequality. fight that goes on as well. So the rich hate the poor kids, but the poor kids are just as mean to the rich kids. So it's kind of like everybody can take a side because everyone's awful and everybody has somebody to hate.
Well, I think John Cryer, I think Duckie is like, eat the rich, reject the rich. I'm so angry, while Andie is angry because she doesn't see a path to become one of them. Like with her love of the houses, with her constant like turmoil about why they don't accept her, she can't accept them, basically going, but we're mean to them too. She's kind of an apologist. She's a class apologist. She would jump ship in a second. I think that's kind of one of the reasons that she went for Blaine, because that's her ticket.
I mean, there's discussion in the film with the principal about like scholarship, and then they have that moment where he's like, if you go out in the world looking not to belong, people won't accept you, which I think is a bullshit message for an adult to tell a child. But, you know, understandable if that's the authoritarian, because this is supposed to be like some kind of, I don't know, like the school district there is like some kind of special, you know, school where, you know, you have a influx of a shitload of property taxes and money, but then also, you know, you got to pull local, you know, kids.
Oh, I was reading it as a private school after that discussion, and she was a scholarship kid.
But then
scholarship kids out in that smoking area.
Yeah. That's what I was like, it's still public. So these people aren't even like rich. They're like asshole rich.
I thought it was just the same district, but literal wrong side of the tracks. I mean, there was a train track, you know, the club she went to was called Tracks. It was just
100%. I did think that the conversation with the principal like could have been the most real moment in the script.
Totally. And I thought she like handled herself really well in it. She was so calm and so kind of measured, and, you know.
And then it never reached that level of like self-awareness or like class politics or like subdued drama again.
Well, and it is also unfortunate that the character that she ends up going to the principal's office for, that's Alex, played by the actress Alex Kinnan, who died in September of '85, so she never got to see. This is one of the last films she did. She was really young.
Oh gosh.
Gina Gershon.
Yeah, and Gina Gershon in there. And we also forget Christy Swanson there, the fucking Slayer's there at the end.
Wait, who is Christy Swanson?
She's the girl with Duckie at the end.
Oh. And wait, who's Gina Gershon in the movie?
She's the brunette who like laughs when.
Right.
Oh, okay. Small bit scene.
There's also, at the time, Molly Ringwald was dating Dweezil Zappa, and he has a cameo in there as the spaced out friend at the club who doesn't talk. And she says, good conversation, Simon, and walks away. Yeah.
See, with this movie, I pendulum between like really wanting to talk about the issues of friendship and incels and quote unquote nice guys, and then just being petty as shit and being like, man, I wish there was some frizz control in the 80s because Molly Ringwald's hair was not doing it for me.
Oh, for real. Except when she had it back with the sunglasses, then it was fine.
Sure, but the whole time it just looked like she needed a deep conditioner.
But James Spader had it. He was using all of it. There was
that feathered hair is outstanding.
I have to say, I got very confused at first between James Spader and
Andrew McCarthy?
Andrew McCarthy. Because I was like, oh, it's the same guy. Oh, it's not the same guy. They just have the same haircut. Like they have the same fluffy hair.
It's really noticeable when they have that wig on him at the very end because he lost 10 pounds and he shaved his head.
The wig
that day and a half since Andie broke up with him was really like, it really took it out of him. It was terrible.
I'm just very happy that James Spader spent the entire movie with his collar unbuttoned to his like mid chest.
I was also happy about that.
Of Less Than Zero and just kind of meandered onto the set of Pretty in Pink. It was like, not going to change clothes. Doesn't matter that I'm supposed to be 10 years younger. Who cares? Let's do it.
I think he was the oldest one out of them. I think he was like 20.
McCarthy was pretty old too.
Which makes it acceptable for me to think that this person playing a high school student was like super foxy.
Yeah, McCarthy was 21. I think Spader was also like in his early 20s.
Fact. I'm probably going to watch Stargate pretty soon to see like quality James Spader, and then I will have a moment where I'm watch Secretary for even more quality James Spader.
That is the Spader trifecta. That
is going to be a theme. You guys go for all those guys, and I'm going to go for the Fred Savages and the Andrew McCarthys.
I really like to play Fuck, Marry, Kill with James Spader's characters. Like, I find this truly indicative of people that I know and like in life, what James Spader characters they like.
Does
and if
Ultron count?
Like, is James Spader, I can't be friends with him, honestly, frankly.
Oh, man.
Does Robert California fall in there somewhere?
It's your own personal version of Fuck, Marry, Kill. But as long as you do have an opinion somewhere on the Fuck, Marry, Kill scale with James Spader characters, I'm fine with it.
That's all you need. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Soundtrack-wise, I did want to bring up that this is based on the Psychedelic Furs, Pretty in Pink, but not the version that's in this film. The original cut of this one is a much more dour, like, more leaning towards New Order, who's also in the soundtrack. So they basically remastered a different version with a brassy horn section and make it a little bit more poppy, and that's what kind of carries it out. And you see the refrains kind of coming back and forth. There's a surprising amount of songs that were written for this movie by artists, and that always kind of just amazed me about it. Like New Order I had brought up before, they had actually gave them a whole bunch of tracks with all the vocals dropped out, so they're orchestral versions of some of their songs, and you kind of hear them pop up. But Echo and the Bunnymen wrote that song that they had there. That Suzanne Vega Left of Center piece was something that they reincorporated, but it actually found its way to, it actually ended up charting after the release of the soundtrack. But yeah, there's a lot of people that ended up doing this. Also the Rave Ups, who were, I believe the front man of the Rave Ups was dating Molly Ringwald's sister at the time. The Rave Ups, who were not featured on the soundtrack, but played twice live in the film itself, which is kind of fun.
It definitely made me, kind of want to go back to my youth, going to like hardcore shows or something at dingy clubs at inappropriate hours.
Yeah, I wanted that part of the film to have been my teenage years.
Yeah.
Well, and this kind of also brings me back to another thing that I really just like talking about this. So the cinematographer for this is Tak Fujimoto, who's a criminally underrated photographer. He's originally from California. He was interned during World War II and then went to London Film School, graduated. He was a second unit shooter on Star Wars. He shot for people like Jonathan Demme. He did Silence of the Lambs. He did Terrence Malick's The Badlands. Like, the guy does a lot of some really amazing location shooting stuff. And for a teen movie, this does not feel like it's shot like a teen movie. And there's a weird intimacy that you don't get out of something, I think, that was coming out of this era that was geared towards kids. Granted, at the time, a lot of the stuff that was coming out was, these like weird sex romp comedies like Porky's and whatnot. So they were more cheaply done. And he added a weird, dark, smoky, minimalist quality to it.
Even as you're saying that, the other movies in the Hughes genre, they all would apply to the kind of regular teen romp look and feel. But this one does kind of feel like a 70s indie, one of the more naturalistic movies.
And it definitely, I think that helps a lot to elevate some of this stuff where, it's a run-of-the-mill teen film outside of this, but given that kind of approach to the way they feel, I mean, just that whole thing of lighting from behind with the headlights and having everything in silhouette, like you would never have, like, we have hot young starlets, we need to have them all lit up, but it does give it a different feel. And the stuff in the club, especially like that, you would never see in a
some of those shots with like Duckie on his bike, and you kind of feel like you're peering at him through a fence, or like when he's being his usual stalker self and following her to Iona's house, and you're like looking at him out through the window, It was definitely, those kinds of shots were really, they definitely set it apart.
Or when they use the stairwell and stuff in the school.
Stairwell, yep, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where you're segmenting certain parts and you're you're putting physical barriers in between. Again, it's one of those things that I just really like, and it's you'll see him pop up because he also does a lot of really great comedy stuff, and he's just a really, really smart cinematographer. I think he's retired now. I mean, the guy's got to be in his 80s. But, well, I think we should start getting to that point where we are going to say, What is our end verdict for Pretty in Pink?
Do we want to do a post-watch star rating?
I'm going with my 4 stars.
Are you gonna would you watch it again? I don't think I'd watch it again. I like
watch it again.
Every couple of years.
Ugh.
But do you watch it? Do you still like? Are you like an apologist?
I'm not an apologist. I like I said, I see it through a different lens every time I watch it. But it also pulls at that like teenage heartstring that's still like, I can have that super romantic moment at the end where they kiss in the parking lot.
Okay, if you had a hypothetical 14-year-old daughter, would you sit down and watch this movie with her?
I'd put it in context, but yeah, I would.
Okay.
If I were to watch it now with a 14-year-old daughter and say, so you're going to have a best friend who is going to develop a crush on you. You do not owe him a relationship. Someone had put that into perspective for me when I was that age.
That's true. It's a good life lesson, definitely.
And there's a wonderful interview with Molly Ringwald where she discusses this exact same thing, where she's going back to her movies that she did when she was a teenager and showing them to her kids and having to have this conversation about like, let's talk about boundaries. Right. Let's talk about why this is wrong and why this is that. And it's a really good read if you get a chance to come across it, because I think she offers up a really good way to approach things that, you know, to use that parlance, problematic faves.
Yeah.
I would still hold this movie in that same light where, like, I don't know if I would recommend it outside of it being a perfect encapsulation of that mid-'80s feeling. But for me, yeah, I could definitely watch this again. But again, recommending it to somebody without any context, I can't do it.
What's your star rating, Randall?
I'd still probably give it like 3.5.
Okay. I had only seen this movie once before. I have no emotional attachment to it. I actually rated it 1 star on my anal retentive tracker of all the movies I watch. And I will probably never watch this movie again and have no regrets about it. Like, yeah. Like it, I'm
with you, Bryce. I'd rather watch The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, I love The Breakfast Club. I am an apologist for The Breakfast Club. I know it's terrible.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I sexual assault, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and I'd probably even give 16 Candles another shot.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to watch Pretty in Pink again.
I remember 16 Candles, though.
But that's the thing. Like, I've forgotten enough of 16 Candles where I'm like, maybe I should watch it again just to make sure.
You know what?
It's worse, right? It's worse.
Worse than this.
It's the worst one.
Like, it's the worst one.
It's the worst one. There is.
I still love it.
Literal rape. Like, literal, not like unobscured in any way, shape, or form. Literal rape in 16 Candles. Upsetting.
Yeah,
super racist.
The sins of John Hughes, this movie.
Yeah, so this, like, I find enough of it like problematic, but also I don't find the storyline compelling enough, or the characters compelling enough that it makes up for the problematic.
It's not even the problematic issue for me. I just find it so superficial.
Yeah,
like it's so surfacey to me that I just don't like. It just doesn't. I just don't see anything. Yeah, like, I don't take anything out of it, you know? It's just all so...
I kept coming up with different plot points that
paper
would make
cutouts.
the movie better.
It's just paper cutouts.
The Breakfast Club, again, total apologist for Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
I like watching it now for that nostalgic, tingly feeling, but also to complain about it as I watch. Like, it is a Riff Tracks version when I watch it.
I have the nostalgic, tingly feeling for Pretty in Pink. I think that's a perfect...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and to the whole, like, you know, this is a first time out for a lot. I mean, this was such a good venture for them, and I think a solid story base that they redid it and gender swapped it like a few years later in Some Kind of Wonderful with the same director, same writer. It's literally the same film.
Mary Stuart Masterson was hot, so it was acceptable for him to.
Yeah, so in the end, Duckie wins in the form of Mary Stuart Masterson. And that.
He was so mad that Duckie didn't win in Pretty in Pink that he wrote the movie again so that big difference when your Duckie is hot.
Yeah, it really does. See, I have more fond memories of Some Kind of Wonderful, and this one always just kind of blended into all of that 80s teen stuff because I literally forgot chunks of this movie.
Well, What
Totally.
I did realize, I did piece this together as I was watching this, that a lot of Randall's mid-20s fashion style was inspired by Duckie, and that was a little upsetting. That was a little.
Hey, if it works, you gotta stick with it.
Did you have the coif? That coif
Well,
was
he wore the army jacket all the time,
the
like
army jacket.
Suspenders, army jacket.
Pointy shoes? Did you have pointy shoes?
I did have pointy shoes.
Yeah,
Did you have Liberace rings? Did you have a brooch or Liberace rings?
I wore a lot more pins.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mostly like pins and
Pins,
sash things.
thin ties, bow ties.
Yes.
Yeah.
Vest and thin ties, man. Mm.
Yeah, Randall went through a vest phase like within recent memory. That was a nightmare awakening for me personally.
You ended up with Duckie.
It's very Duckie.
I did marry Duckie. Like, let's not get into that in a deep podcast.
Well, that sounds about right. The place to end this. Well, that was a fun journey through Pretty in Pink. I recommend, I guess, with a huge bunch of caveats.
Put it in context.
Yes.
Shaking my head emphatically.
I guess.
You
Yeah.
can skip it.
Okay.
No.
Watch
Yeah.
Breakfast Club again.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Keep defending Breakfast Club.
Judd Nelson. He's wonderful. So pretty.
Nope.
I know.
That's a different podcast.
I
Sorry.
know it's a different podcast, and it's my never-ending downfall.
We're gonna have our next podcast venture is going to be Bryce, Helen, and Alex talking about dudes we think are hot. And then we're gonna bring Dana on as a guest star to be like, you are wrong.
This is wrong for so many reasons.
I would be king, and you would be my queen.